Justin Baldoni has receipts. If that's the case, then why is the latest PR spin that actually the woman claiming Baldoni sexually harassed her is secretly in love with him? A textbook abuser's move. Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, was himself accused of sexual assault. While a student at UC Berkeley, Friedman and two of his frat brothers were escorting an intoxicated 17-year-old girl so she could join her boyfriend. She blacked out and never made it. She woke up at Friedman's frat house where Friedman and his two frat brothers took turns assaulting her. Friedman doesn't deny that the incident occurred, only that she had agreed, she had consented, and settled the lawsuit for $40,000 and no admission of liability. Now, I'm not saying that's indicative of anything, but it should raise an eyebrow that a male ally chose to be represented by someone else accused of sexual misconduct. And that it then should not be a surprise that Baldoni also doesn't deny the events took place, but just argues they were consensual. Baldoni accepts calling Lively sexy, but says that Lively used the word to describe her character in a text message, arguing that Lively using the word to describe her character but calling out Baldoni when he used it to describe her is a double standard. She gets to call herself sexy. Why is it a problem when I do it? Women are so inconsistent. How are men supposed to know how to behave? Everything is sexual harassment these days, which sounds a lot more like a red pill incel than a supposed male ally. But it also ignores the entire exchange between Baldoni and Lively, which Baldoni doesn't deny. I think you look sexy. That's not what I'm going for. I'm sorry, hot, not that either. I guess I missed the HR meeting. Lively clearly communicated a boundary twice. Baldoni ignored it and responded in a flippant and dismissive manner, making light of the HR process. This is a man who has spent hours talking about consent, and his justification for this behavior is, she said sexy in a text message. Which is the same excuse used regarding Baldoni and Heath entering Lively's trailer uninvited while she was undressed, arguing that Lively, while pumping, had invited Baldoni to her trailer to work out lines. But even if we grant this represents exactly what Baldoni says, consent is specific and reversible. An invitation to a trailer one time while pumping is specific to that one time. It is not an open invitation and should not be interpreted as an invitation in perpetuity. A man who felt comfortable enough to build an entire platform talking to men about consent is now suddenly acting confused like he doesn't know what FRI stands for. Baldoni's suit argues that the Times sensationally alleges that Mr. Heath showed Lively a video of his naked wife, and then agrees, yeah, that's exactly what happened. The only thing they disagree about is that Lively's complaint labels the footage as corn. Except Lively's complaint doesn't say that at all. It says that Lively immediately asked him to stop, thinking it was corn. Heath explained it was a video of his wife giving birth, and Lively asked if his wife had given consent, to which he replied, she isn't weird about this stuff, as though Lively was weird for not welcoming it. Baldoni's suit actually doubles down on this defense, saying Heath informed Lively that his wife condoned his displaying the video. Any suggestion that Heath engaged in exhibiting inappropriate content is false. And I said this in my first video, but don't show nude imagery to people without their permission should not need to be called out, especially to two men whose platform is male allyship. Even when Lively expressly stated she did not consent, their defense against harassment is Heath's wife's chill with it, stop being weird. And this gross misrepresentation of consent isn't the only abusive behavior in the suit. There's also our dear friend weaponized therapy language. Lively's suit does not use the term gaslight, except when referring to a quote from Baldoni. Baldoni's suit, however, accuses Lively of gaslighting twice, referring to behavior that are very much not gaslighting. Gaslighting is when you manipulate someone into questioning their entire reality, denying facts and claiming they're just imagining things. An example would be how Baldoni claims the list of 30 items in Lively's complaint was never presented to Baldoni, the Wayfarer team, and could not have been agreed to. That in reality, many of those items were encountered for the first time in the complaint itself and refer to highly disturbing events that never occurred. They do, however, agree they did receive the list of 17 protections for return to production from Lively in November, but they never engaged in any of the behavior listed in it, and signed it not as an admission of guilt, but just in the spirit of ensuring Lively felt comfortable on set. Aww, they're just good guys, everybody. The problem with that narrative is that those protections were sent from Lively's lawyer to the film production's legal counsel as an alternative to forego a more formal HR process, establishing that it was already well known that Lively had issues with their behavior, that a formal HR complaint was likely, and that legal counsel on both sides had already been engaged, and that this was presented to Heath and Baldoni as an alternative. Claiming you had no idea when there's a paper trail from the legal team is ridiculous. Now, the final item in the list of protections was that an all-hands meeting would be held between the producers, Sony, Lively, and her representative to confirm and approve the plan. Baldoni's suit confirms that that meeting did occur, but says it was just to discuss filming the next day, and that they were blindsided by Lively presenting a list of grievances, which, if you'll remember, was the entire reason for the meeting. And having previously stated that they agreed to these sexual harassment protections to, quote, ensure Lively felt comfortable on set, they then turn right around and rebrand them as Lively presenting Baldoni with an ultimatum to either cast someone else or work with her in the way she works. It was her way or the highway. And this isn't the only instance of manipulation in Baldoni's suit. It asserts the reason for agreeing to the protections was that many of them were already in place, citing specifically the first item in the list, that Lively demanded an intimacy coordinator be present at all times on set, arguing that an intimacy coordinator had been engaged a month before filming started, but Lively had declined to meet with them, instead saying, I will meet with her when we start filming, which, in Baldoni's own words, put him in the awkward position of meeting with the intimacy coordinator alone and then relaying sex scene suggestions to Lively in the intimacy coordinator's absence, which is a complete reversal of the process and defeats entirely the point of having an intimacy coordinator. An intimacy coordinator should be the go-between between director and performer to remove the power imbalance. But also, what absence? An intimacy coordinator is supposed to be present at all times on set when intimate scenes are filmed. By Baldoni's own admission, those standards were not in place. Lively was not demanding anything but requesting the basic SAG-AFTRA standards and protocols for the use of intimacy coordinators. In short, Lively's grievances were never presented to Baldoni, and if they were, well then there were protections already in place, and if there weren't, well then those events never happened, and if they did, they certainly weren't harassment, and if they were, well then it was consensual, and if it wasn't, well then his wife consented. And if Lively felt exploited during filming, well then that's her fault for not meeting with the intimacy coordinator before filming. And yet there's still a wave of folks watching this male ally speedrun the narcissist prayer and defending him as a good guy. But what makes this so infuriating is the behavior is being done in plain sight. When Baldoni's lawsuit mentions Lively's publicist, Leslie Sloan, it mentions that she was, quote, once backed by Harvey Weinstein. Now, there's no reason to include this. It's entirely irrelevant to the lawsuit. They're just trying to attack her reputation. But they also include a screenshot among a series of screenshots about an entirely different conversation about bot accounts, showing them digging up a decade-old article about Weinstein backing Sloan's new company, saying, do we say Blake and Ryan hire Harvey Weinstein publicist? They're doing the behavior in the complaint where they say they're not doing the behavior. Throughout the lawsuit, they paint Lively as an inept idiot. She makes questionable wardrobe choices and is ridiculed by the internet for her frumpy look. She says grab your girls, wear your florals, and the backlash is the inevitable fallout of her own tone-deaf messaging and inability to read a room. Unequivocally a consequence of her own actions. Just her terribly dumb, poor decision-making. But also, Lively is a Machiavellian genius who managed to outmaneuver and manipulate everyone against Baldoni at every turn, creating a very convenient narrative for Baldoni where every criticism and flaw can just be blamed on Lively. If they engage in harassment, then they were manipulated into it by Lively, who had previously given consent. If they agree to workplace harassment protections, they were manipulated into it by Lively. If the cast turn against Baldoni, Lively did it. If the author turns against Baldoni, Lively did it. Negative stories about Baldoni, Lively did it. And the major defense of Baldoni seems to be, if he really is this person, why hasn't anyone else spoken out about him? But others have spoken out against Baldoni. When Shabnam Moharabi put out her statement of support in August for Justin, Cody William-Smith, a cinematographer who worked with Justin on My Last Days, shared his experience. Working with Justin was one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my entire film career. I watched him firsthand exploiting the stories of people with terminal illnesses for personal gain. On that particular project, he treated the crew like trash. I honestly have a hard time thinking of someone else I've met who has been more disingenuous. It's been a decade or so, but he's been like this for a while, and it doesn't surprise me at all that the entire cast of a film is saying this about him. And of course, the response? He must be connected to Blake Lively. And you would think that we had learned this lesson by now, that an endless stream of folks saying, well, he's always been nice to me, never ends well. Instead, we should be offering far more skepticism, examining carefully not just what he says is untrue, but also what he accepts is true, and checking that his behaviors and actions line up with his words, values, and principles. The narrative that a male ally doesn't understand consent and his victim is secretly in love with him should be a much bigger red flag.